Welcome back to 10-Minute Texts, a weekly show for Torah students on the go. Hello, this is Isaac Shalev. Welcome back to 10-Minute Texts. This week, we're doing Parshat Vayakhel, and we're going to start with a midrash. A midrash for us is like a metal detector for someone combing the beach. The midrash can identify great questions lurking just beneath the text. And if we understand the midrash well, we can understand what was troubling it. We can find anomalies in the text, we can find gaps that maybe we hadn't considered before. Where we are in time, where we are in our narrative is that we are now dealing with the construction of the Mishkan. In the last couple of parshas, we've heard a lot about all of the things that are going to be gathered for the Mishkan. Then we had the sin of the golden calf, followed by the construction of the Mishkan, which seems in some ways to be a kapara. It seems to be in some way an atonement for the golden calf. Looking specifically at the text about people bringing their contributions. And the Midrash tells us, the Nesim come forward and they say, let the Israelites bring whatever they'll bring, and whatever's missing we'll complete. In other words, we'll backstop this project rather than funding it up front, rather than inspiring contributions, we'll just fill in the gaps. And the story goes on that there was no need to fill in gaps, that the Israelites brought so much wealth, so many gifts, that it was necessary to tell them to stop. And I'm interested as to why the Midrash diminishes the contribution of the Nesim, why it presents them in a negative light. So we start with Vayavo kol ish asher nisa'o libo v'chol asher nadvarucho oto. So we have everyone came, everyone whose heart stirred him up. So kol asher nisa'o libo, nisa'o, nisim, it's the same word, it's from to be lifted up. And here, kol ish, every person is being described as someone who has been elevated. Vayavo ha'anashim al hanashim kol nediv lev. And we have it again. And the interesting thing here that we get is ha'anashim al hanashim. These are, again, the same letters for nasi. We have the nun. Here it's a shin instead of a sin and an aleph, but ha'anashim, the use of that word, instead of, for example, vayavo bnei Yisrael, is again, it just calls us back to the previous asher nisa'o libo, and we have these nisi'im on the tips of our tongues. And again, kol nidivei lev, and they're bringing all kinds of wonderful things. I also want to point out that the women are brought out here. The women are coming. That's an unusual reference. We don't normally get the women called out, and when we do, it's for emphasis. So both the men and the women are coming. As we continue through the text, we see once again the women. V'chol isha chachmat lev. Now we're starting to have women being described as wise-hearted. We go forward and we see that this continues. V'chol hanashim asher nas'a liban. That their hearts were stirred up. That word nisim, liban otana bechochma. And finally, we get to the nisim. And we have a completely different description of how the nisim contribute. V'hanisim haviu. They brought. There's nothing unusual about how they brought it. There's no words of elevation. And if we read what they brought et avnei hashoam, ve'et avnei hamiluim, la'efod ve'lachoshen. They bought some stones for Aaron's garb, and ve'et habosem, ve'et hashemen la'ma'or, shemen la'mishcha, k'taret hasamim. They brought some spice and oil. They brought consumables, things that don't last. The Medrash's sensitivity is borne out by this. The Medrash sees all this and says, I guess the Nesim were missing out in some way. There's something wrong here. And in case we were unsure, the text gives us sort of the exclamation point. After talking about the Nesim for 2 verses, it comes back to the regular person. Kol ish ve'isha asher nadav libam otam. Once again, whose hearts made them want to give. They are presented, every man and woman is presented as giving on a much higher level than the Nesim, who are just Vanesim Iviu. So it's quite clear in the text that the people's contribution is presented in an elevated fashion, and the contribution of the Nesim is presented in a minimized fashion. And what's going on here is an explicit criticism of the leadership of the Jewish people, and we have to ask ourselves why. We're about to meet the two gentlemen who are charged with the building of the Mishkan. In meeting them, there is an underlying question, an unspoken question. Why are these the two people building the Mishkan? I mean, who are they? Betzalel ben Uri ben Hur. Well, we know who Hur is. Hur is the son of Miriam, which is to say that if Betzalel is his grandson, Betzalel is a little kid, right? Betzalel is a young guy. And Dan is like the smallest and least important tribe. So, two marginal players. Who should be building the Mishkan? Shouldn't it be the Nesim? Lest you say that they were chosen because they're the ones who knew how to do the work, read verse 31. Vaymale oto ruach Elokim bechokhma bituna uvedatu v'chol melacha. And God filled him up with wisdom, with understanding, and knowledge of all workmanship. In other words, God could have poured that into anybody. God could have poured that into the Nesim, into the elders of Israel. Why are the Nesim being called out in this way? Well, we've encountered their failing earlier. If we go back a few chapters, we actually have our last encounter with Hur. So what's going on? This is Moshe. He's going up to Har Sinai. Vayakhel Moshe v'Yoshua meshato v'yal Moshe el Har Elohim. So Moshe goes up to the mountain of God. And before they go up, he says, Ve'elez kenim amar. To the elders he said, Shvu lanu vazeh ad asher nashuv alechem. V'hine Aharon v'Hur imachem. Hur is with you. Mival dvarim yigash alehem. That's the last time we hear of Hur. So this is Hur, Betzalel's grandfather. We all know what happens next. Moshe goes up to the mountain, and the Israelites worship the golden calf. And Hur disappears. And the Midrash tells us that Hur got in their way. Hur attempted to keep them from worshiping the golden calf, and the mob kills him. So Hur is representative of leadership doing right. But the Zkenim, they do nothing. Right? They fail to prevent the Israelites from worshiping the golden calf. What I love about this text is that God's response to the failure of leadership is instructive. See, what God does is God first turns to a new generation. Betzalel and Oholiav, these are young guys. They're the next generation. Sometimes in our own politics, we just keep electing the same old people, and they fail us, and so we elect the other old guy. And we just have this revolving door of politicians who perform the same way in leadership, and we wonder and we become disconnected. And I think that what this text is telling us, number one, don't send the same guys back. Look for the next generation. Look for folks who are demonstrating ability and skill and talent, and give them an opportunity to do important things. But I think the second thing this text is telling us is it's on us. When the text describes all the men and the women, it's inverting all the existing leadership structures and saying it's not about the leaders, it's about the followers. It's saying that every person has the ability to change their mind, to take different actions, to contribute and to participate. And the people leap at that opportunity. You know, we've seen that in the last few years throughout the world, where people of all stripes, from every nationality, from every race and religion, rising up in protest. And we see it right here in a text 3,000 years old. People have power, and they're able to rise up, and when their leaders fail, it's their responsibility. And when each person is willing to take responsibility, then God fills our leaders with His Spirit, with wisdom, with understanding, and with knowledge. And that's what we're looking for. Take responsibility, take up arms, to the barricades, to the protests, or at the very least, to finding ways that you can contribute in the communities that you participate in and value. Thanks again for listening to 10-Minute Texts. Now it's your turn.